The strongest part of your body, the most complex organ with incredible abilities, is your brain. Unfortunately, most of us don't know how to unlock its full potential. What if I told you that you could learn faster than ever before, read more quickly and deeply, and achieve an extraordinary level of focus? Think of it like this. Our bodies may be similar, but how we use them varies greatly, affecting our appearance and performance. Your brain works the same way. Some people know how to use it to its fullest, and that's what sets them apart from the rest. That's why today's book is Limitless by Jim Kwik. This is a highly practical guide. Everything I share with you can be applied right away, starting now. This book is designed to spark a light bulb moment in your mind, helping you unlock its true power. Unlike what we usually do by diving straight into the book, this time, allow me, dear viewer, to tell you the story of the author behind this book. This might be the first time we share the author's story in such detail, but I'm confident it won't be a story you'll just brush off. Trust me, many people experience similar emotions, even if the circumstances differ. That's why I'm certain this story will light a spark for some of you, and that's all I hope for. But before we get started, don't forget to share this video with your best friend. And so, let's begin by going back to the author's childhood. The moment in school that completely changed the course of his life. He says, "I was in class one day when we heard the sound of fire truck sirens. Like any group of kids, we all ran to the window to see the firefighters as the incident was happening close to the school. To us, firefighters were the closest thing to superheroes, but the only problem was that I was short, so I couldn't see out the window. Then I noticed one of the kids pulling up a chair to stand on, and it inspired me to do the same. I ran to grab a chair, and as I stood on it, surrounded by other kids, I lost my balance and fell directly on my head. I remember feeling the heat of blood running down my face before losing consciousness. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Unfortunately, my injury wasn't minor. After that injury, so much changed in me. I became a quiet child, a complete contrast to the curious, energetic, and confident kid I once was." He says, "What made things even worse was that my memory was affected. I became slow to understand, to the point where my teachers had to repeat things over and over. Sometimes I would pretend to understand just to avoid embarrassment, even though I hadn't grasped anything at all. Reading became my worst nightmare because I had obvious difficulty with it. While other kids were learning things easily, I was struggling on the other side. But there was one thing I could read: superhero comics. Those stories about superheroes were the only thing that caught my attention. Despite the difficulty, they managed to keep me focused, and I could actually read them." He says, "Life was extremely difficult for me. I remember one particular class where it seems I had upset the teacher because I couldn't understand the lesson, even after she explained it multiple times. She raised her voice and said, 'This is the boy with the broken brain.' That sentence never left me. It felt like it etched itself into me so deeply that I started seeing myself through it. This, dear viewer, is a perfect example of how words can have a lasting impact. As they say, words can make or break a person. By God, we might say something that destroys someone without even realizing it, thinking we're just being funny. Anyway, back to the poor kid. He says, that sentence became a label for me. That's why adults need to be mindful of their words, because those external words quickly turn into internal traits for children. And honestly, that's a terrifying reality. He says, my only saving grace was that I was very stubborn. That stubbornness helped me move from one grade to the next. I also can't deny the immense help I received from other teachers, friends, and family. Thanks to that support, I managed to get into a very modest local university. For me, though, it felt like a huge achievement. University wasn't easy. Getting in gave me a wonderful feeling, like I had potential, like I could become a better person, reach a higher level, and make my family proud of me. My ambition started growing until reality hit me hard. I quickly realised that university wasn't a game. In school, teachers had cut me a lot of slack and even gone easy on me. But just a few months into university, I decided to face reality. I wasn't where I needed to be, and university was far beyond my abilities. The only thing I knew for sure about myself was that I was incredibly weak. So I decided to drop out of university. I told my friend about my decision, and he suggested that before going through with it, I join him on a visit to his family's house. The idea was simple: to clear my head and take some time to think before making a final decision. And here, please, please pay close attention, dear viewer. He says, I arrived at my friend's house, and after greeting everyone, his father asked me to join him for a tour of the house and the outdoor gardens. While walking, he asked me a very normal question. Jim, how's university going? He says, at that moment, I felt like a child again. That question was the last thing I wanted to hear. Without meaning to, I started crying and told him the story of the boy with the broken brain. He says, this man had an incredible amount of patience and listened to me so attentively, it was almost unsettling. After I finished talking, he asked me, Jim, why are you in university? What do you want to become? What do you want to do? What do you wish to achieve? And what do you want to share with others? It was as if someone had poured cold water over me. These questions were so simple, yet I had no answers for them. I had never thought about them before, and I didn't know what to say. So I started rambling, trying to answer him, and he stopped me. He said, stop, stop. Then he handed me a blank sheet of paper and a pen and said, write. Please, go into this room, take your time, and write down answers to all my questions. That's exactly what I did. I sat down and wrote. When I finished, I folded the paper, only for my friend's father to walk in. Without saying a word, he took the paper from me. I felt so embarrassed. I never expected him to take it, and I was too shy to ask for it back. At the same time, I didn't want him to read it. I felt cornered. He began reading it aloud. For me, it felt like hours, though it was only a couple of minutes. When he finished, he raised his right index finger and his left and said, You're this close to achieving everything you wrote on this paper. He says, I looked at him, thinking to myself, what kind of nonsense is this? I thought, even if I lived my life 10 times over, I couldn't achieve a single thing written on that paper. He brought his fingers close to my head, and suddenly that small gap became the size of my brain. He said, This is the key. Then he told me, Come with me, Jim. I want to show you something. He took me to a room in the house that turned out to be a library. As soon as I stepped in, I thought, Welcome to the nightmare of books. And the worst part of the nightmare was when my friend's father started pulling books off the shelves and handed me a stack. He said, Jim, I want you to read these books. Dedicate 1 week to each book. Of course, I was super curious, just like you might be right now, dear viewer. You're probably wondering, what books were these? Don't worry, I'll tell you. The books were Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which we've already covered on this channel. By God, it's one of the most impactful books I've ever read personally. The Magic of Thinking Big by David J. Schwartz. The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. And don't worry, these last 2 books are on the way, and we'll be discussing them here on this channel soon, God willing. He says, I reached out and took the books, looking at him while my mind was screaming, this man didn't hear a word I just told him. So, I chose a polite response and said, honestly, I don't know how I'm going to read these books. As you know, reading isn't easy for me. He replied, don't let school interfere with your education. I responded, I understand that reading these books would be amazing and will definitely help me, but I don't want to make you a promise I can't keep. He decided not to reply directly, but instead he used the sneakiest method I'd ever seen. He grabbed the paper where I'd written my answers and started reading it aloud again. At that moment, I didn't know how to describe my feelings. The closest thing I can compare it to is this. I felt a driving force inside me. I couldn't tell if I wanted to prove myself to him, to myself, or to someone else. But my response to him was, I will read these books. I don't know how, but I will. Now, I need to pause the story for a moment because I can't move past a quote from Napoleon Hill that talks about opportunities. He says, opportunities come through the back door, disguised as bad luck or a temporary setback. And that's probably why a lot of people don't recognize them. Honestly, I couldn't get past this idea, even after years of reading the book. Someone who thinks like this sees everything in front of them as an opportunity for growth and improvement, never letting anything slip by. As I was reading Jim's story, I saw his friend's dad as an opportunity. The door knocked, and it came in the worst form. He was reading, facing something he wasn't good at. Fear was at its peak, looking as real as ever. You're taking this person out of a place they've been stuck in for years. So, you and we meet people disguised as opportunities. We watch a video or listen to a podcast with some advice, a little warning, or a simple invitation to improve, but we ignore it. We don't want to change because we're scared. So, we skip it. Sorry for drifting off from Jim's story, and I know you're still with him. Let's get back to our friend who went back to university with those 3 books. He says, I looked at them, then looked at my university books and thought to myself, these are the books I promised I'd read, and these are the university books I have to read. The choice was simple. Live each day with the goal of reading. And that's exactly what happened. I stopped hanging out with my friends, stopped watching TV, and did nothing but read. He says the stress I was under was through the roof, and even my sleep was affected. I lost weight like crazy. One day, I collapsed from exhaustion, and with the help of my friends, I went to the hospital. Lying on the bed, I waited for the IV drip to finish. The nurse came in with a cup and placed it aside, and it had a famous quote by Einstein. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. At that moment, I had nothing to do but think about my situation. What was I missing? I was learning slowly, but was it possible that there was no way to make learning easier for me? What if I was spending too much time in the wrong place? Was there a faster way to learn? A more effective method? These were some of the questions that made me promise myself to find answers. Perhaps this was the effect of the books I had read. I wasn't sure. But I was determined to learn more about how I learn. It all started with these questions. No book or lecture was left untaken, with the goal of learning more about my brain, how it works, and how I could learn more efficiently. I began to notice changes in myself. My focus improved, reading became easier, and within 2 decades, I had written books that sold millions of copies worldwide. I was even invited by big companies like SpaceX and Marvel to share my journey and what I had learned. For me, it was important that you hear this person's story before I share the summary of the book and the ideas we can benefit from, because his story highlights key aspects that the book will later explain, areas we might be overlooking in our own personal story. Now, allow me to share with you our plan for summarizing the book. We'll divide the book into 3 main sections and extract the essence, focusing on the key points we need to ignite that light bulb. The first thing the book addresses is the mindset. I don't think this is something new or unknown to you. It's a term we often hear, but few of us truly understand its real meaning. It's all about what you believe about yourself, your abilities, what you deserve, what is possible, and also about the world. This is your mindset, your lens through which you see the world. And that lens can lead you astray if you see the world in a way that doesn't align with reality. So, the most important question is, what makes your mindset different from anyone else's in life? What if I told you that your environment and life experiences shape the way you think about the world? Even though these experiences may have changed over time, you're still living the results of them. To illustrate this further, I always think of the story of the elephant. It's a famous story you might have heard before about the baby elephant who was born and tethered to a stake in the ground. The rope limited the space the elephant could walk in. As the elephant grew and became strong enough to break free, it still continued to walk in the same small circle because the stake had been there for so long. Now, you've changed. You've become stronger. But what's happening inside your mind is like that elephant. Even though your circumstances have changed, your mindset is still limited by old beliefs. This is what happened with Jim. After his injury, he read a book and realized he had difficulty understanding and reading. He built that belief about himself for years. Until he reached college, things had changed for Jim, but he didn't notice. He had grown, changed, but still, one experience was enough to build a belief about himself. Now, the question for you. What is something you've believed about yourself for years that isn't true? To dig deeper, I want you to imagine this. This is what you believe about yourself. Let's say you see yourself as lazy, lacking motivation. Of course, that internal voice you know, the one that loves to criticize and bring you down, transforms that belief into a value. Then it becomes meaningful to you. You genuinely believe you are lazy and unmotivated, and when it turns into words, it eventually becomes behavior. Once it becomes behavior, it's a dangerous point to reach. It's a terrible situation when what you believe about yourself turns into behavior, especially if that belief is untrue. And most of the time, it's untrue. You'll start taking actions that reinforce the idea that you are lazy and unmotivated. You'll use words like, I have bad luck, I'll never succeed, where am I? Or, where is my comfortable, wealthy life? And those words will eventually turn into actions. Dr. Jennis, the head of the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Emory University, describes this internal voice as a thief who steals the life you want and places boundaries in front of you. If you leave it uncorrected, it will lead to your downfall. Now, you're probably wondering, what's the solution? I know my inner voice is negative, but how do I fix it? The worst thing we can do is try to solve our problems with fake positivity, this hollow, unattached optimism that we can't truly feel or connect with. What I want you to do is identify every description you've ever given yourself that starts with, I am not. I am not funny. I am not someone people enjoy being around. I am not good in front of an audience. I am not smart enough. I am not as clever as I should be. The list goes on. And even though these descriptions might seem superficial or simple, over time they grow into something much deeper. The person who sees themselves as not funny will eventually believe that others don't enjoy being around them, and that will affect their confidence. This is how it leads to behaviors. This is exactly what we mean. Now you've identified the word. Think for a moment. Where did it come from? Was it your father who said this about you? Do you feel that this word stuck in your mind? Was it your mother, your friend, or your teacher? What is the source of this information? And since when has this source influenced you? Once you reflect on this, start working on it. Change is not simple. You need to begin by changing your inner dialogue. If you remember from our book on change, we said that change is not like peeling a fruit. It's a lot of hard work. You need to resist yourself every time you say something negative like, "I'm not good at speaking in front of people." Add a small change to it, like, "I need to speak more in front of people." Please, never think that I'm asking you to be overly positive, where everything with yourself is always positive. No, a natural person goes through circumstances, situations, and moments of weakness. In those moments, their inner dialogue might not be at its best. The most important idea here is that this doesn't turn into something repeated or a habit that affects you over time. And I know, by God, that I still haven't answered the most important questions in this segment. Since the book is very large and contains crucial and amazing details, allow me to turn it into a series, God willing, which will be very helpful to you and those around you. If you share it, I will be grateful. And so, I can say that we've reached the end of part 1 of this wonderful book. Thank you very much for your precious time. I hope I've benefited you, even if a little. Don't forget to share this segment with your best friend, and I'll see you soon.